Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we teach you how to transform your business through understanding and using trends. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
And we, of course, are Spark Partners. We develop leaders who help to grow your business. And in the end, we're looking at trends and helping you to understand how to use them to grow your business. We have our website, sparkpartners.com, where you can go and find resources on how to grow your business using trends and using some of the insights that we've developed over the years. And today, Adam, let's talk a little bit about the space race in kind of a little bit different perspective. Of course, back when you were a kid, and a little bit later when I was a kid, some of us dreamt of being astronauts. I know that for a fact. I had a moment in time when I wanted to be an astronaut. So I don't know if that was one of your dreams. But I want to start there, and then I want to leap forward to talk about the space race as it's been played out the past number of years between Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and of course, Sir Richard Branson. Over to you.
Well, of course, the space race was started with President John Kennedy, and it was a government program. And for many, many years, NASA and federal funding was 100% of what we would think of as the space race. And it was a race between the United States and the Soviet Union to get a man into space and to get a man safely to the moon and back. The transformation that we've seen over the last 15 years was we took NASA and federal dollars out of the program and commercialized it. And at the time that this first happened, I thought, there's no way this is going to work. But I didn't understand. I didn't understand how big a market there was for putting satellites into space and for doing experiments in space. And so that's where these commercial companies came in. And, I would have thought for sure it was going to be Boeing or Lockheed Martin that was going to be the leader in this endeavor, because, hey, that's, that was their business. That was their value proposition was, moving people around in the air. But yet, lo and behold, it wasn't the traditional player. Just like in so many other markets we see, it wasn't the traditional player that developed this new business, but rather the people that came from off on the sides. It was the new people, with the Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin, and SpaceX that have now created this market. So, like we've seen over and over again in this disruptive world, it's frequently not the one who was there first, the one that you would expect to be the company that makes it happen, but rather somebody that came at it from out of left field, seemingly.
Yeah, out of the wild blue yonder, for sure. And so that really gives us an opportunity to pause. If we really think about most business disruptions that occur out there, it's we see a big player make a new product or service, and we consider it innovative, but it's a sustaining innovation. And then out of the left field, out of the wild blue yonder, some other company comes out and creates a new market, a new marketplace, disrupts the existing market. And then from that point on, there's a big shift. So this is, again, one of the things you talk about quite a bit and have talked about over the years. And so how are they able to do that? I know that, and I know the answer, by the way. But how are they able to do that? How was Sir Richard Branson able to take his really colossal empire of 50 or 60 companies and carve out of that what amounts to a freeway to the heavens?
Well, there's the 4-step process that we talk about in all of our training and all of our coaching and everything we do with people, which is you got to focus on trends, look at the outside world, not so much looking at yourself. You got to be willing to identify those unmet customer needs and figure out how to help customers get those needs met in a changing world. And then you have to be ready to be disruptive. You have to be willing to be disruptive in what you do. And then the 4th step, and this is the one that people, I think, really get the most upset with me when I talk about, and that's having blank space. A place where you can go innovate, a place that's not controlled by your existing resources, it's not controlled by the group think, it's not controlled by the industry think, but actually it's a blank space that the people there have the opportunity to develop entirely new solutions. And when I talk about this, a lot of times with small businesses, medium-sized businesses, they'll say, I'm totally tapped out, all my resources, I don't have any money to put into that. And that's where I'd go back and say, look at the 3 companies we're talking about here, Virgin and Amazon and Tesla, basically. Those are the three companies that the three innovators we talked about championed. None of them had anything to do with going into space. But what those leaders do is they create blank space for new things to happen. And so in that blank space of creating new things is where the innovation occurs that can be, totally new solutions. And that's, I just always try to tell people, if you're putting 100% of your resources into doing more of what you've always done, of course you can't innovate, right? You're not putting any resources into something new. You're just trying to sell more of the same product to the same people. So you're only going to get innovation whenever you find some time and you put resources into these blank spaces where people can go off and innovate. So, I mean, just out of the blue, for example, do you know how old Blue Origin as a company, how old that company is?
I don't, but I'm gonna guess that it's 12 years old.
Yeah, it was founded in the year 2000. It's almost 21 years old. It's fully 20 years old, and so this is where what I enjoy about this is that here you have this guy Jeff Bezos, and he's in the process of creating the Amazon that we know today. And then that's going to become also Amazon Web Services, right? So we all talk about Amazon Web Services. That's been the growth engine that's created this vast empire. But what we forget is that he's been 20 years working on this blank space project of space flight, how to get people into space. And think about this, for most of that, he didn't even have a good sense of how he was going to monetize it. I run into this all the time. People say, I don't want to invest in something until I know how I'm going to make my money back. But if we look at great innovators, and here I'll go off and talk about Facebook with Instagram, or we can talk about Google with all of their innovations. The great innovators don't put the monetization first. What they say is, we can go into this space, let's figure out how we add value. Let's figure out our value proposition. Then what we'll do is figure out how to monetize it. So Blue Origin is, in fact, 20 years old. Virgin Galactic is 17 years old. And SpaceX is 19 years old. So 19 years old, SpaceX. Now think about that. How long have we talked about Tesla? Or Tesla and Solar City and the panels on the roofs? A lot of this stuff is less than a decade. Less than a decade we've been all hyped up about Tesla. But Elon Musk has been imagining and developing a business around space, and he's probably made more revenues than anybody else because he's put more, his company SpaceX has put more rockets into space with more payloads. So he's been at that for fully 17 years.
Yeah.
So these blank space projects, people, they don't want to do them, and they just don't realize often how much value there can be created.
Yeah, I would say that you have to do it if you really want to grow and succeed over the long term. I mean, if you think about you just mentioned, overnight success is what, 20 years?
Yeah.
And here we are with the advent of, this new endeavor to space, like you said, 20 years old, 19 years old, 17 years old in the works. And we've only been really talking about it for the past 4 or 5 years. But all the while, in the background, they're working on that. I'm reminded of Google, and of course, their 20% time. They're kind of famous for giving their developers what it amounts to a day a week, right? 20% of their time that they can use to explore anything they want. And from that, 3 big products were born. It was Google News, AdSense, and of course, Gmail was actually developed by a handful of developers that were just kind of fiddling around with something and ended up creating a brand new market.
Yeah. And so that's, again, the point that I make to a lot of entrepreneurs and small business people and leaders of medium-sized businesses. But this also applies to CEOs and people in major corporations. Is how much blank space do you have in your life? How much time do you allow yourself to be thinking about an entirely different future, to do scenario planning in a way that lets your senses and the trends drive you to a new place? When I give my talks and I talk about Virgin, I always tell people that Richard Branson, from the day he started in business, always gave himself plenty of time to go on holidays. And so, he would take, for example, and go ballooning. And so for 3 weeks, he'd be in a balloon trying to see if he could get all the way around the planet in a balloon. And he's not using his iPad and he's not using his iPhone at, 30,000 feet in a balloon for 3 weeks. figuring out, if he can circumnavigate the globe. He's really sitting there taking time, using his mind to think about what's going on and what new ideas can he develop. Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, he would go sailing, and he became an owner of one of the America's Cup yachts that won that race. But he does the same thing. He'll go out sailing, and he'll be gone sailing for a week or two at a time. And I say, here's these people that have generated billions of dollars of wealth, and they've captured a good chunk of that. They've made themselves into billionaires while creating billions of wealth for their investors. If they can take off 2 weeks or a month and forget about their cell phone and go into some blank space in their mind and really vacation and figure out what the future ought to look like, why is it we can't do that? And it's really a matter of allocating your resources. I find people put themselves in the center of their business because it makes them feel good. It makes them feel comfortable. It's like, a business couldn't get by without me. And the answer to that is, well, if it can't, there's something wrong here, because no business should be that way. You shouldn't put yourself in the center. In fact, you should have the business set up to operate so that you can think ahead. You can figure out, you have some blank space in your life where you can read, you can be entertained, and you can actually get your mind into new places. You can get outside the box and think.
Precisely. Yeah, we see that a lot. We almost see a competition by some of the business owners, executives we speak with, about who's working the most hours. Well, I worked 70 hours last week. Well, I worked 80. Well, I worked 100. And you know what? To what end? If you are so crucial in your business that you need to be there 18 hours a day, and if you leave, it's going to collapse, you've got a serious problem with your business.
My business partner, Mary Lou McNally, she always calls it the curse of busyness. That people will just, they're so busy they don't have time to do something. And so the end of it is, she sees in her client base that people get busy and they don't ever get to the real strategic elements of their business. The really big problems, because they're busy all the time. And they use that as an excuse to not do the hard thinking about strategy, to not do the hard thinking about what the future might look like. They just say they're busy, and it becomes an excuse. And that's really bad. I mean, for those of us that are out there trying, to say, look, the world's changing and you got to be innovative. What we're trying to drive home here in this podcast is that you have to have some of this blank space in your life where you can do this. And then you have to start collecting up the data and putting it into some kind of a tool and tracking some things and seeing how it's going, and then setting up, teams and seeing how it's going. Because as we said, these guys have been trying to figure out how they're going to get into space for 20 years practically, and they've been funding this blank space project, making it happen. Now here again, the limits of my thinking. I was thinking to myself on Sunday after Branson came back from his making himself into an astronaut, I said, how do you make this into, I caught myself thinking about what's the monetization aim here? And he did an interview in which he said, okay, I'm charging $250,000 per ticket. And he said there's 3.5 to 4 billion people on the planet. It's not unrealistic that 1 million of those people would be interested in a space flight. I kind of thought, well, that's true. I didn't think of it, but yeah, it could be 1 million people. And he says Tom Hanks has bought a ticket, and you start thinking about all the people that do have a few $1 million for whom that would be interesting. He says if there's 1 million people that are willing to buy a ticket at $250,000, you have $1 trillion business. Wow. I mean, look how easy it was for him to kind of come up with that idea of $1 trillion business. And that's the way we need to be thinking as innovators. You sit there and you think about where are we going, where we're going to end up, and then you think about how you're going to monetize it. Of course, we know over at SpaceX, they're monetizing it as a business-to-business game. They're taking payloads into outer space for experiments and for setting up. Come on, help me out, Manny.
Satellites and such.
Satellites, yes. They're trying to put satellites out there. So they have their payloads. A very different business model than Richard Branson just described.
Yeah, and we talk to business owners, and one of the excuses we get, as you mentioned earlier, is, they don't have the resources or they don't have the time. But the other angle of that is almost to flip that on its side, saying that you can't afford not to do something like this in your business. Otherwise, right. you're going to be content with 3, 4, 5% growth. And I had a rebuttal by one of these folks the other day when I mentioned it to them, and they said, "Well, McDonald's is successful, and they don't innovate very much." And my sort of my parry to that was, look, they do innovate. It's all mainly sustaining innovation. But imagine if McDonald's would have made some significant innovations, how much bigger they would be today. Sure, we have Chipotle that came out of that situation, and we have other smaller things. But imagine how many burger joints are out there now, right? There's like hundreds of thousands of these places that, McDonald's could have been at a higher level, but they chose to play the safe game.
In 1996, I had the opportunity. I had some meetings with Michael Dell. The origin of that was his company was growing very, very fast. They were making all these personal computers. He was hiring on the order of a couple thousand people a week to help make all of these PCs, laptops, and servers that they were sending out the door. And he was hiring consultants. He had Bain & Company sort of in force there. They'd been there for 2.5 years, team of about 80 people from Bain working on his strategy. And he was hiring IT consultants, including Computer Sciences Corporation, where I was, to help him build out his own infrastructure for this rapid rate of growth. And so I was having some meetings there one day, and I said, well, what are you going to do next? What's going to, after the PCs, what are you going to do next? And he looked at me and he said, why are you wasting my time? I didn't bring you in here to talk about that. We are barely keeping up with demand. I don't have time for anybody that's going to waste our resources on anything other than making more PCs. And I went back and I said, wait a minute, what's the future going to be for monitors? I mean, are we going to reach a point where we don't have to have projectors that are displaying PowerPoint slides, or in fact could just connect directly a computer to a monitor? Or what if we had technology that allowed us to operate between our devices that was wireless, right? Wireless technology. Now, all of these bigger screens were in the early prototype stages. They were very expensive. They had flaws. We had Bluetooth technology come along, but it was very limited in terms of what it could do. So we had wireless technology emerging, but it wasn't doing much. And at the time, in 96, I was saying, why don't you dedicate some resources to that? And he brought in the Bain people, and they said, why would we waste that? We are growing so fast, we need to figure out how to get into new markets in Europe, how to get into new markets in South America. We are putting all of our energy into that. And that's what Dell did. And where's Dell today? Right?
Yeah.
Here you had a company with all these resources, but even in that context of selling, making lots of profit, did they dedicate some resources to blank space to do something new? No, they exactly went the opposite direction, trying to maximize the growth of the existing historical business.
What people to understand is that success, as much as we really strive for it in a business, could be one of the most blinding, most anchoring situations. When you become successful, you become content, you become focused on feeding that same fire, and as you wrote in your book, you kind of succumb to your own success formula. And you kind of run up against a brick wall. And you're right. I mean, the growth rate of Dell today is flat, if not slightly negative. Things aren't going where they were, where he thought they would be going by now. And it's a little bit of a warning to some of our listeners. If you have a business that's successful, don't wait until you see that downturn to make decisions in going in a new direction. You should already have several blank space teams in operation, working independently, autonomously. We talk about the 5 M's. We talk about the mission, the metrics, the management, the money, and the moat. That moat protects the team. And that's a really good segue to talk about our course, because we talk about exactly how to do this in our course, how to actually put together a blank space team, how to make it a success, and then how to decide if you're going to jump into that new direction, the way that Netflix did, going away from delivering DVDs into this new thing called streaming, or whatever that might be.
Yeah, I think that people have a lot of tools at their disposal for managing the business as it exists today. They've got, all kinds of financial tools, ERP systems. You've got customer tools like CRM systems. You have all kinds of tools that can collect data around your existing business. And you can actually spend all of your time analyzing that historical data. But what we don't have enough are tools that help us look externally, look for the trends, and then record the trends, set metrics around measuring the trends and the rate of adoption of trends, which we talked about before. How do you know a trend from a fad? Well, look at adoption rates and see how quickly it's being picked up and looking for unmet needs. And that's one of the big things we, of course, stress in our master class is that here's a tool where we start to do that in a programmatic way. We start saying these are trends that are important. We're going to track these trends. We're going to collect those trends. We're going to get metrics on the external world, how fast people are converting. Take, for example, if you were in a business like as traditional as agriculture. It's easy to keep track of how much wheat you grow and process, how much bread you make, but Wonder Bread's been bankrupt 3 times, right? They can't, because people don't buy as much Wonder Bread. But are you spending time tracking, what's going on with plant-based protein, or basically your fake meats? Because now we start saying, maybe I would track that. And I'd say, but are you tracking the growth in the terms of the number of people who are vegans, the percentage of people that are vegetarians? Well, if you did that, you'd go back a decade ago and you look at it, the number of vegans and vegetarians were on a very, very high growth rate. It was just a very small number. If you double the number of, double 10, you get 20, right? But if you double 10,000, you get 20,000. And what we talked about before is that's the log scale that we look at. It's the rate of change that's important rather than the absolute size of the change. And so if you're, 10,000 customer business and you add 200, that's far less impressive than if you're a 100 customer business and you add 100. Right? Because now you've doubled, and it's much better to be in that scenario. And so that's where our tool comes in. Our tool comes in to say, track those trends, get those metrics on the outside world, start thinking about how they apply, and then have, as part of your embedded planning system, scenarios. That we see trend 1 developing, trend 2 developing, trend 3 developing. Where is that leading us? Well, it's leading us towards a mobile world, a wireless world. Now we're looking at what in terms of space? I guess, one could think that it could become possible that if I'm living in Los Angeles and I wanted to meet somebody, because I felt it was really important to do it physically in Paris, I could be there now, using this technology we saw demonstrated over the weekend. I could perhaps be there in 30 minutes. Right? Yeah. Now, we've got a lot of infrastructure that isn't there right now. How would I get to the platform? How would I, how do I get the plane? How do I get it? Blah, 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 scheduling. It seems almost impossible to think that we could use this sort of technology to transport ourselves, across halfway around the world in 30 minutes. But then again, it seemed impossible that we would have electric cars with charging stations all the way across the United States a decade ago. Right? Mm-hmm. So you just have to start to say, wait a minute, these things are converging. That could happen. What do we need to track? Well, okay, let's start looking at what are the components that are going to go into that new world, that new scenario. What are the components? How fast are they being developed? How fast are they being adopted? Right? And one of the things you notice is that the Boeing has come out and said that they're going to launch a new supersonic transport, and it's going to be flying commercially in 3 years. Oh, now there's another data point that feeds into this idea of space travel, people being willing to pay exorbitant sums of money to go long distances at very, very high speeds. So the re-emergence of an SST in 3 years. Supersonic transport. So that's what our tool does. I think when people start to get this master class and they look at what is it actually doing, it's helping you to bring together the data points, put them into a scenario, and then track it so that you have metrics that you can use for your planning from the outside in, just like you'd use your ERP or CRM data from the inside out.
Yeah, and people need to realize that, look, in just a little over 100 years, we've gone from Kitty Hawk to basically a civilian going into space.
Yeah, it's not basically, it is true. It is a commercial flight. And now, let me tell you the other thing that I find really, really fascinating. So Bezos is going to take off in a week, right, on his Blue Origin rocket. So a different style of technology. I heard a comedian say, he was doing a joke series, and he said, yeah, well, what the pilot ought to do when he's in space is ask for a raise so that he can be sure to get Bezos back down safely, right? Ha, ha, ha. And I thought at the time, what that comedian didn't realize is there's no pilot on Blue Origin spacecraft. It's autonomous, right? It's going to take off. It's like SpaceX in that there's no pilot involved in those rockets going up or coming down, whether they're taking off or landing. And so that's, again, looking at where the future is going to be. We've started to see adoption saying, we don't need a pilot for that. In fact, a pilot might be a negative thing because pilot error tends to be the biggest reason we have crashes. So let's remove that and go with an autonomous spacecraft. So these are the data points that are out there that we have to start to accumulate and not just say, oh, it's interesting. I think a lot of people probably looked at the Virgin Galactic flight on Sunday and said, that's interesting, but who cares? And the answer is you should care, because it's another data point in terms of some things that are happening in the world that are creating opportunities. And the question you have to ask yourself is, are you preparing for that world? Are you thinking about that in a structured way so that your business could be helping to make those things happen? And we're talking about new airports, new landing fields, new ways of trying to get things done. And so then you saw how it breeds in these organizations. Inside of Amazon, there's a whole team that's still working on how do we try to do deliveries with drones, right? They announced they were going to do it. It didn't happen in the first year. A lot of people thought it was a mistake, and people forgot about it. But that team's still now been inactive for 5 years. So there's a blank space team inside Amazon working on drone delivery, right? And they're working on unmanned flights for their airplanes, for the 747s that carry packages across the country. So those are the things we can keep track of and start putting into our scenario planning to help us be better at seeing the opportunity so that we can try to be the next Richard Branson. And I have to also be sure to say this. Richard Branson is 70 years old. 70 years old.
Yep. And
people out there that say that this is a young man's game, that blank space teams are a young man's game, that technology is a young man's game, they are doing a disservice to themselves.
Right. There's a great article I just read regarding the average age of a successful entrepreneur. And it's in there, it's 47, 48. And they had a couple other data points that people in their 60s, mid 60s, have a higher chance of taking an idea from a nascent idea to commercialization, because they have that steady hand, you know.
And they've got more experiences to bring into thinking more robustly about their scenarios. Bezos is 57, and he's walked away from managing Amazon on a daily basis. He's going to be in blank space, right? It's kind of like Bill Gates is now in blank space with his philanthropy and what he can do in the world. So in fact, these are good things, right? It gives you the opportunity to be more creative. Elon Musk is testifying this week in a case that's been brought against him, saying that the combination of Solar City and Tesla was bad for investors. By the way, I wrote a column about that was published in Forbes at the time it happened, saying I thought it was a great idea for investors. And Elon Musk retweeted the tweet about the column. But in his testimony, they're asking him, and he said, if I had my druthers, I wouldn't run Tesla. He said, that is not the thing that turns me on. What turns me on is developing new ideas. This is true. You can go look it up, on Google, and you'll see that this testimony was made this week, and that he doesn't really like being the CEO of Tesla. That's not what's charging his batteries. And that's what I wish more people would start to understand, is that if you're the leader of an organization, making more money by being operationally excellent and digging deep into the details and pushing your team hard and finding weaknesses in your team and all those sorts of things, that's not going to get you to the next opportunity. Really, that kind of work, that optimization effort, a lot of people can do that. If you're a real leader, you need to get your head out of that and get your head into what are these new opportunities? Where should I be putting resources into some blank space teams and letting them go figure out what the new ideas are, the new business opportunities that could really push your organization forward and create wealth.
Absolutely. And, these CEOs and founders and other executives, they get so wrapped up in, as you mentioned, the operational excellence and all those other features, because they want to keep their company profitable and their shareholders, give them dividends and support their employees and all that. What they fail to realize is that success is their duty, and innovative thinking is part of that. It has to be. You've got to be looking over the next horizon if you want to be viable and really go to that next level.
And again, one of the things I hear when I talk to people about these blank space teams, they're like, I don't know how to get started. How do I get started? How do I get started? Well, obviously, you and I can coach these people, and we've done a lot of that over the years. But I think what people need to know is there's a tool now that you can go to our website, you can buy the tool, and it will programmatically, 28 different modules, help you identify trends and figure out how to go develop these white space projects. So you don't have to have Adam Hartung or Manny Turan in the room to get there. There's now a tool that you can use that can help you to sort these things out and give you the opportunity to be the next Richard Branson.
Very well said. Well, thank you so much for your time, Adam. Always appreciate the opportunity here. Remember to go to our website, sparkpartners.com. Go back, listen to other podcasts that we've done, and you really start to get a flavor and really the full meal of what we offer. But go to the website, take a look at our Think Innovation Masterclass, and be sure to email us if you have any questions, Manny@sparkpartners.com or Adam@sparkpartners.com. And with that, I will sign off here on your final, Adam. Take care, and we'll see you in space.
Thank you very much, Manny.
Cheers.